hear about how moving has affected your career.
I come from 14 years of freelancing as a motion graphic designer. And at some point, a guy who used to work at Sony, he went to Google and he literally on Facebook typed me a message saying like, hey, come join me at Google, what do you think? And my girlfriend at the time, I messaged her like, hey, I don't know if this guy is serious, but you wanna come move to California? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. And that's how it happened. So 6 months later, we moved. And I've been here for 2 years now. And my career path was either going to be like becoming a director or a creative director at ad agency. And I really wasn't thinking about augmented reality, the field that I work in now. So initially I thought like, oh, it's just doing experimental 3D stuff. But now working on creating a visual language that helps people work and understand AR. So it's very rewarding as a designer to come up with a language that way. But it's nothing that I intended, like thinking so many years ago that I would end up doing this. So interesting.
A surprise for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think you'll find that, like, for all of us, I don't think any of this existed. It certainly didn't exist, you know. I have a degree in film. I thought I was going to be making films forever. But then those doors or those paths cross, right? And people try out different things, right? So we're all chasing something that's a little bit different, that's staying on the cutting edge. It's about being innovative in a field that is constantly evolving through creativity and technology. And I think we all sit at those crossroads. And as long as tech continues to evolve, creativity must, come up and immerse as a part of that. And so it's just constantly meeting those two peaks. And it's interesting because when you think about it today, if you look at education, schools now are teaching things that are based around augmented reality or mixed reality or virtual reality, but they certainly weren't 10 years ago. So in the next 10 years, 60% of the job market is going to be jobs that don't exist today for anybody, and they're not going to school for it. So people will be in the same position all over again.
You just blew my mind, man. That's wild. Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be a business owner, because we're inventing jobs at this point based on the needs of our projects. And then the projects come, and then we find ourselves trying to find the right talent, but we have to groom the talent. And so we're coming up with titles we never thought we'd come up with, or combinations of people that they're raising to fit the needs of the work. It's fascinating. And then as we grow, as our agency grows, we find ourselves creating entirely new departments, hybrids of architects, engineers, designers, coders, software developers, everything. And then you take the architect, you teach the architect the basis of motion graphics, and all of a sudden you have this new hybrid. And then from there, we start recruiting more and training them, and it's explosive that way.
It's like grafting talent, isn't it?
It's absolutely like grafting talent. And then we start going to schools and spreading the message, and then it starts to, infiltrate that, and we have the opportunity to maybe open minds there. Yeah, it's all moving at such rapid pace right now.
Ryan, weren't you just saying you've been hiring people who have UI, UX background for what was traditionally, like you said, motion graphics studio?
Yeah.
This would be kind of novel.
It's the shape of our work has changed dramatically over the years. And I started out as an artist, and now I just really call myself a business owner more than anything else. I'm involved in the creative, but mostly it's about like, how do we go into this area? How do we experiential, we're getting into doing that. It's like, who do we need? How can we start this business without having to go all the way there? So we just we'll start with the creatives. We'll get some of it, we're not getting the architects yet. Maybe we'll hire that stuff out, and then we build into it as we get more and more jobs. And that's kind of been my role is about the growth of the company and trying to figure out how to keep the creative culture together as we expand into these different areas, and then also, hire the right people to help us do that.
And that's also super interesting, right? Because you're a business owner and you are a business owner, but you both started as artists of some effect. So your jobs have changed drastically. Like the things you do now are millions of miles away, right?
Yeah. There was a time when, it's like going home at 10 p.m. was normal. And working the weekends, and because as an artist, you're always driving yourself to do better, and I want to go in, I want to work, I want to make this thing as good as it possibly can be, and today it's 5 o'clock, I don't have any more meetings, I'm gonna go home, which is just a different way of working and about organizing things, and so that. It's a different mentality, I guess, is when you're an artist, you're always just on the box working on your thing, and when you're thinking big picture and you're moving pieces around and then doing stuff like this, it's like you have to have time for that. So then you have to put other people in charge of things who can be dedicated to it, because I can't be dedicated to those things too. So then all of a sudden you're so far removed from the creative that you're able to. I guess, spend more time thinking about what's next.
Yeah.
And just a different mindset, right?
Yeah.
When you're thinking about culture, like how you create and build and hold on to your culture while you're growing simultaneously, that is a completely different problem-solving space than...
I never thought I would be, sitting there having meetings talking about our creative culture. And things like diversity and things like, all of a sudden we've gone from, 5 guys or 5 people in a small office to 200 worldwide. And it's like, now all of a sudden you have these corporate concerns, like the handbook and, do we have the right language? Let's review the handbook and make sure that we're covering all of these issues. Yeah, that's stuff that I never ever thought I would have to deal with, but it has been interesting for sure. And I think as you want your career to continually change. It keeps it interesting. I still, would love to get back to doing some creative here and there, but I can kind of choose maybe new paths for that if it's going to be more like IP-based stuff or whatever. So.
Sounds like you and I need to talk more. That's the main thing. I'm at a personal crossroad right now where I have to make a choice whether to keep rocking on pitches, keep making things, or do I, go full in on just running this business with my business partner, because we are hitting a growth spurt that I've never seen. And when you build a home, you need to build it correctly. And the only person or people that can influence the culture of your studio, it has to start with the founders. Mm-hmm. And if the founders don't have a good culture, it's all bad. Everything goes down. So what Ryan's saying hits my heart, because it's so important to create that atmosphere where people feel included, people feel like their voice can be heard. Where they can, be the best that they can be, and that takes a ton of energy, And you've all been in places where you feel like your voice isn't heard. Or when you do it right, that company. When you're there, it's the greatest feeling.
Speaking of voices we haven't heard, John, how do you feel about what we're talking about?
Wow, it's super exciting for me to hear about all these next level steps. Because I'm a guy who is just out of the grad school right now. I've been doing my art for the last 7-8 years, but all these legendary people around me are so ahead of the curve right now. So it's so exciting to hear their experiences and their struggles.
But you've got fresh technology knowledge to bring to the table, so.
I hope so. I don't know.
What's happening for you that's super interesting in the motion department?
For the last 6 years, I've been more into immersive experiences. So the idea of taking the designs out of the screen and bringing them into space using projectors or other techniques or large LED displays was something that I was mostly focusing on. So the big change over there was like when motion becomes more like an architectural experience, all the timings and all the aesthetics and everything changes around it compared to designing for displays. So I think I've been inheriting like an architect's mindset, or I was just pretending, I don't know. But now combining it with geodesic domes and VR and AR and blurring the boundaries between physical and digital spaces is so much fun, and there's so much new technologies going on. So yeah, it's always something new.
And I know we're all visual based at this table, but could we please make a pact and say we're not going to forget audio this time? Because that's going to be so important for immersive, right?
Right.
If we're going to surround ourselves, I just don't know if anybody is really, you know, we have Dolby Atmos now, but I don't know that anybody's really thinking about when you are creating, you know, some kind of immersive experiments where you are blending your physical and digital environments, what does it sound like?
That's half of what we do. Sound is super important to us. It's actually the reason I got into animation. I was painting and drawing and just always jamming music. It's like, well, you know, if you're making it move, then audio is super important. I mean, try watching a film without audio. It's just, this is not a film. But when we're creating installations, we're very conscious of the noise that we're putting out there, right? And so there's different technologies. You have sound showers that are super local, where you can only hear it when you're close to it. We're working on an airport project right now, and we're very conscious of all of that environmental sound. So our focus is how can sound heal people? How can it soothe people? You know, and not just be, you know, noise for noise sake. And then when you get into the digital installations, having it passive or non-distracting in retail environments is another big part of it. We're working on a really big retail installation where it's like, imagine being in a mall and you're creating a score. How do you compete with that? How do you make that beautiful and not distracting?
Yeah, it's interesting when projects bring in the psychological nature, the psychological aspect of it, I guess, becomes an issue that you need to solve. And it's, you know, we've worked on some projects that are AI based, and it's like, okay, well, now we're talking about the personality of AI and what should it be, and should it be, you know, should it sound like a robot? Should it not? Those questions that you don't really think about until it's in front of you, and then it's like, wow, this is really complex. And you know, we talked with like linguistical experts and psychiatrists and all sorts of people to sort of get that information that is, you know, what is the best experience someone can have. And it's you know, going from being a designer or, you know, creating motion graphics to creating experiences, be it in a space or on a screen, you know, it goes beyond just visual art, I guess. Yeah, and there's a lot more to consider.
Which is super interesting because you bring up AI, and now we're living in a world where we have lots of digital assistants, right? Which is the burgeoning path for AI. And you look at, so then I flip it and go and look at the visual designs of them, and I think about film. I was like, oh, are we in another one of those places where film is predicting what our future is? If you go back to things like HAL. Hopefully people know who HAL is. Maybe I just showed my age. But it's just a voice. You just hear a voice. And so now look at all the devices on the market that are voice enabled.
I think there's also a red dot involved with HAL, right?
Oh yeah, there was a red dot. But I mean, no face, right? No, there's no human connection to it in a place where we want to make it a connection for humans. There's no, if you look at all the devices, they pretty much look similar as far as design goes from a hardware design perspective. Why isn't there a face on any of them? Why are the commands done like mouse and keyboard commands? that is your audible control. You are being conditioned as a human to speak to technology based on the way technology was raised, not raising the technology to speak to a human the way a human speaks to another human, or even looks like a human.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're those conversations come up in our studio all the time, and one solution is definitely adding a visual to it. But how is the visual created in a way that connects people to it? For us, it's mostly installations. If there's a voice, then there's some really neat visual that comes with it that pulls you in, that you can talk to, and we're talking about ways to create a human aesthetic to it, but it's all digital on screen. But yeah, those conversations are coming up already.
Well, it's the question of if you're talking to AI, do you want to make sure you know it's AI? Like ethically, you know, it's that when Google did that, was it Google? Yeah, they called and made the appointment at was it a hair salon or something? Was that what it was? Yeah, yeah, that was the question I was watching with my son. Actually, we were watching the keynote, and my son said, he was 14 years old, said, "That's really creepy. You should know when a robot calls, if it's a robot or a person." You know, and that's just it's a thing you have to think about. Like, what is, if we're going to be ushering this into everyone's lives, what's the appropriate way to creatively and experientially, you know, phrase it, I guess.
It's a new version of the uncanny valley.
Yes, that's exactly.
I think that's fascinating because this whole topic of authenticity that's really hot right now. Jeff, do you want to weigh in on the authenticity of AI?
The authenticity of AI. I may not be best suited to answer that question. What do you think, John?
You're a human.
You're human. You have human-like qualities and features.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm spending so much time in front of a computer and like I'm receiving, my thinking process begins to imitate of how a software works. So I begin to feel like I'm an AI sometimes. So I don't know. And my girlfriend says that too. Like sometimes I sound like AI. So it might be something like me, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm an early prototype or something.
Do any of you feel that artificial intelligence can create and actually enter the job market as a designer? It's something that comes up in our studio quite a bit. I mean, we're not concerned about it, but hypothetically, do you?
I think it's a matter of time. I don't think that there's any real reason to think that eventually an AI won't have an understanding of the patterns that it needs to emulate to satisfy all of our levels of psychology. I think eventually all we are is pattern recognition systems. To be kind of cold about it. That's what the human brain is just designed to recognize and react to patterns, which is what an AI is effectively learning to do.
I think if we allow AI to create for us in that capacity, then the authenticity becomes it's gone completely. It's not authentic anymore, and then it loses value. So it's, you know.
What makes you say that? What's the distinction that separates creativity from us versus creativity from a machine learning algorithm that's learned to emulate how we perform creative tasks and then even innovate on those patterns?
I suppose that it's more of a human feeling about like things that are innately human, which is creativity. We cherish it, art, music. All of a sudden, if robots start making it, then, and even if they do a good job, it's like then it's become like a commodity that you can just press a button and it turns on for you. And I don't know. I mean, it's like music. They're starting to have, you know, there's AI that makes music, and I've tried it, and it actually works pretty good. I mean, it's not going to be the Stones, you know, or Radiohead or anything like that. But it'll be good enough for certain things. But it'll never be that, I guess is my point. And if we bring this into the world and let, you know, say just for example, like, okay, it's an animated commercial about diapers. And 4 days later, an animated commercial about diapers comes out of the machine, then that'll just be like, I mean, not that anyone cares about diaper commercials anyway, but but it'll just be like, I guess, even the notion that you might care is totally gone, I think. You know what I'm saying?
I do, but at the same time, I also feel sometimes like a lot of our creative process is dictated by even colder aspects of, like, for example, marketing decision-making, which is algorithmic in nature.
Yep.
And I actually think in some respects, an AI that's learned what we're doing to try and satisfy ourselves and each other, it might look at it and go, you guys have got this all wrong. We can totally give you a better product that will satisfy you creatively in a way that a marketing department can't.
I guess because some things, I mean, in all art, if you're just following a logarithm or a pattern, you're never going to create that thing that's interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's the moment where and that's the human
Natural intuition.
Yeah, and it's reacting to things on the fly. Like, for example, this Nike campaign that just came out with Colin, what's his name? Kaepernick or whatever. That's a very interesting approach. AI would not say, let's bet on this guy who is a pariah in the NFL and at total odds with our president. But I think it's a super successful campaign and was super ballsy of them, and it's actually working. So,
Joost, with motion graphics, where you see that going?
Where I see it going? I think it's definitely going in the direction of augmented reality, and how you can do storytelling in that front. So away from the traditional 2D screen, or maybe the 3D glasses that they tried in the cinema. But using your surroundings to tell stories and to do motion there basically opens up the entire world as your narrative. So I definitely see a trend of it moving there.
And are you dabbling in that already?
Probably.
Are you willing to share?
I'm afraid I can't.
Is there a new, and this might not be something you can talk about, but is there a kind of new grammar or language of how you're directing people's attention? Because obviously with filmmaking, you bring the entire audience's attention to exactly what you want them to see. And they don't even realize it if they think it's incidental, but you're burying things into their mind that they're not even aware of. And obviously giving people so much scope for engaging the whole world limits how much you can keep the attention to what you want them to see as a storytelling mechanic.
Yeah. Some things I can talk about is expeditions in AR, where one of the first prototypes was actually going to elementary schools and having kids learn about certain objects using augmented reality. But it's all smartphone based. So as great as it sounds that you're able to augment the whole world, you still have a phone as your window to the world, which is kind of limiting in a way. But it's this whole new UX problem, so to speak, where people they initially don't understand, like, hey, this object is on this table and I can move around it. Like, they'll try to pinch it to enlarge it, but it's actually there as though it's physically there. And once you understand that, then you're able to tell that story around it. Like, it can be a character or it can be anything else. But you're still working with that small window to the world. It's like wearing super small glasses and trying to get somebody to create a movie like that. While the whole, imagine everything is kind of blacked out, but you got these small little windows and you have to make a movie within that. That's kind of what it feels right.
But I think you're right. You nailed it because you think about a passive experience and an interactive experience. It's almost exactly like we see with like the difference between film and gaming, right? So when you think about gaming, it's very difficult to control narrative in a gaming environment because ultimately every unique person who picks up that game can take a different path. And so it's, in that way, there is conjecture for how does it change the passive experience of storytelling? Because even if it is on a flat screen, that you're augmenting the world, everybody handles their mobile device differently, and they will move through about the world in a different way. And so ultimately the story will come to them through their own nature and habits, not necessarily prescribed by a camera in a studio. So
yeah, I guess, because I've had no experience with AR or even VR particularly. I put on a headset once and it didn't go very well. But
That happens.
My sort of intuition tells me that as a storytelling device, it's going to have a very difficult challenge to overcome, which is individual preference. And I'm wondering if that's affecting the way that people are approaching the development of, well, it's not, maybe that's, people are saying, let's make it an experiential thing, which is what I think I'm hearing, is that it's mainly about the experience of real world situations that get enhanced or get massaged to be different, but it's not so much about telling somebody a narrative. But maybe I'm wrong.
We're dabbling in telling a deeper narrative around objects or products within installations. Say you see a automobile, a car, a nice car in a showroom. There's augmented ways now to tell stories around that, where we're actually trying to get people off their mobile devices and into the experience.
Cool.
And I do wonder, at some point, when are they contact lenses, right? And like when are you just naturally living the world that way?
Yeah, Joost, when?
Not at liberty to say yet.
But yeah, right now they're panes of glass that are in front of objects, or you can slide them around on tracks. That's kind of neat too. Or you can pick them up, and they're custom designed objects, and you can move throughout a space. But it's still limited to a tool, right? Something you touch, or hold, or put in your pocket. But I'm excited about what's beyond that.
and the theater too. Theater is experimenting with that already, and like how you get to hear a narrative, right? So now instead of just going and sitting in the theater, I mean traditional theatrical experience, like there are companies, production companies renting out houses and warehouses, and they're designing those, and you walk through at your own pace, and you decide if you start in the kitchen or if you start in the parlor or if you're wherever it is that you're starting. So I think it's burgeoning across the arts as far as like how we think about storytelling and having that experience in a more relaxed way.
Yeah, I think the hindrance to bringing storytelling to these experiences is one is its cost. You get a lot of people with really grand ideas about telling stories in AR and VR, and then they sit down and it's like, okay, how much is this going to cost? 4 times more than doing it normal. And then everyone's like, okay, well, let's just pull back a little bit. We'll maybe pare this down. And then that's something that we're up against with it. It's unless people are really willing to put the money into the art form, and it's going to be hard to tell stories. Good stories, I guess.
John, where do you think it's going? The whole motion graphics.
I think it's gonna go into very, very different ways. But what I'm more interested in is something more different than drama or maybe storytelling, because I'm more interested, like, when these things are becoming more spatial and experiential, I'm more interested in, rather than following a narrative, I'm interested in experiencing different moods or different environments or different feelings. So I'm more interested in the sensory experience side of things. For instance, I really enjoy going into a flotation tank and just having a sensory deprivation. It puts my consciousness in a certain level or certain mood. I'm more interested in experiences like that, how we can create similar experiences with using these immersive technologies and select the mood that we want to feel, through these, rather than just following hero's journey and what happens to them.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to some people who are really interested in this experiential entertainment. And it's not just like, plays or anything of that sort, but it's what is the next level for entertainment destination. So I think if you know Meow Wolf, you guys know that? It's like things like that where it's something you go to, and apparently millennials are more likely to spend money on this sort of event-based entertainment than they are to buy product. And then I spoke with one woman who was backed by a big fund, and they had put like hundreds of millions of dollars together to try to go and find people to make this content. So it's happening. I mean, it's changing, and it's going to change the way we tell stories, I think.
Yeah, we're actually going through or living in an experience-based economy, and it's been that way for probably the last, I think, like 15 years. And there's been a spike. I mean, we've seen it firsthand. We have large corporations and brands investing now in it. Early on, I feel like they were risk takers, doing adventurous things. And it's interesting too, because like what you're bringing up is a shared experience, right? Many of our clients want to add VR, add AR to that, but we're often finding that those experiences within a shared experience are actually isolating. It's as isolating as being on your device on the streets, and you're kind of unconscious of like what's happening, especially with VR. Our clients want us to add that to the latest group event, but yeah, you're vulnerable. You're stuck in your own world.
I think that's where kind of goes back to the AI thing we were talking about earlier, where marketing or focus groups or just the intention, maybe possibly short-sighted intention of investors could actually influence and direct the entire space, and not necessarily in a kind of way that's really the best use for it, you know? Because obviously the funding is going to dictate where the whole technology moves, and whether that will mean it will cater to what's best about the technology, or whether it will mean that the funding kind of dictates where the experiences go, you know? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just something that could be a factor.
What's reality, right? I mean, you have major brands investing in something, and the bigger the brand, the more focus it gets, right? I like to think all this stuff comes from kind of artists too. Artists are usually the first wave of people experimenting, and then the corporations catch on and hire artists to do that thing, and then the artists move on into developing something new, and it's just always like this leapfrog, the cycle that happens.
Jeff, we haven't heard from you in a bit. What are your thoughts?
I'm stewing on all of this. It's very interesting to me. Yeah, I think one of the things I thought about is, a lot of the work that I've been a part of, in one way or another, was directly attached to advertising of some way. And I think it's awesome to hear about experiential work, because it's not necessarily tied to selling X amount of units of something. And I keep thinking about how advertising would start to lean into this world of different experiences. And I keep thinking 10 years ago or 15 years ago, if we were finishing an advertisement from the motion graphics world, 16 by 9, before that, 4 by 3, I guess. But you had like one file type that would go out. And now, every time a job comes in, I know that there's not gonna be one deliverable. There's not one file. There's like 100 files that go out for all these different places, all these different types of screens, different resolutions. It's vertical, it's horizontal. That's kind of just become normal in the last 2 years or 3 years, I guess. And I like that idea of develop once, publish everywhere. And I think that's something I've heard brought up a lot when it comes to, AR or VR or anything that's new in a way, is that it goes back to a concept, whatever that concept might be, and then there's just the proliferation of ways of sharing that and experiencing that. And I think that all of this, in a way, is going to put a lot of pressure on the good ideas. Going back to your reference for Nike, it's who has that idea? And go really full circle if the AI can process that. But I think that'd be the one, in terms of authenticity, going on. That's the one thing that I think all of us at this table hopefully will still be a part of,
Right. Mike, I'm interested to hear what you think about that whole one concept and then going out to all the places.
I love the idea that the concept drives all the output. I don't have a particular. I think that's the ideal world, is that the concept drives everything. My personal experience, I work in games and film as well, but my personal experience is that quite often the concept doesn't drive the process, and then things get very extrinsic very quickly, and then it gets very messy, and then those 100 file formats becomes a real nightmare. because it's kind of fumbling over itself in the process because the concept isn't there. Yeah, I agree 100% that concept should be the key focus, like the actual conceptual thinking behind an idea.
Yeah, it's something I'm personally taking seriously because I'm feeling this responsibility to put purposeful content out there. Now that we're doing airports and shopping centers and all of that, it's like, it's no longer just a TV screen that you can choose. Like, we're actually infiltrating space with all of our motion graphics. And so who's going to lead the charge in telling good stories and not adding more pollution and noise into it? And when you're talking about hundreds of deliverables, lots at stake for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a two-word gut punch that I keep hearing, and it just bothers me. I just want to throw this out the table and see what everyone thinks. But people keep, I've just heard this a couple times now, disposable content.
Right.
It kills me. Yeah. I like to think that we're all still creatives with artistic vision some way. We figure out a way to monetize that talent to have a living, let's say. But I think now that, timelines for like the shelf life of anything we do is so small, so short, that, especially when it gets in the advertising arena, is it good enough? It pains me. What lasts? What's worth making?
I think that it's the very beginning of having all these screens and having all these different places where the content will play and people will experience it. And I'm hoping that what's going to happen is this idea of disposable content, they're going to realize that actually is very ineffective. You can't just throw $10 at something and make crap and have your name on it and hope that it's going to have an effect. So we're going to go back to, okay, we need to have meaningful content. We need to have meaningful experiences for it to have any effect, because there's so much crap that any brand who really wants to get their message across has to spend the time and effort. And I think that we're seeing it starting to happen. Where before you get lots of phone calls about just doing, we've got $10,000 and we want 60 seconds, and then those calls have stopped pretty much. I mean, and now it's really people investing in longer term projects with good timelines and good creative too. So I'm hoping that it's going to continue and even get better.
I'm seeing a trend towards better, actually. And I've been through the disposable content, and it makes me sick. As an artist, it just is gross. My team hates it. It's actually bad for morale. Yeah. No one wants to see the work go down the gutter or just be a consumable thing that no one watches, right? And that's a bad thing. But yes, brands are starting to take it seriously. And in a cluttered marketplace, you really need to stand out. And so do you want to have the nice thing or the junky thing? That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because now the ad agencies are shrinking and the internal teams at brands are growing and they're more closely tied to the brand. I mean, it's just happening now. I mean, the technology sector has been doing it for years, but other brands like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and even IBM, creating these internal agencies that then select people to work on projects. And I think when you're doing that and you're not relying on the agency to have the strategy behind your messaging and it's more of a internal effort and it's a brand that you're closer to, that people are starting to really think about what they're putting out there for their brand and having before I would always say people at ad agencies, and I'm not saying anything bad about ad agencies, but people at agencies, their goal was to make something to make themselves look good so that they could put it on their reel, get the next job at the next agency with a better title and more money. Now, these people are going to brands and they're working there thinking they're going to be there for 20 years. And the goal necessarily isn't to make your reel, it's to, well, in some ways not get fired. So you're more likely to really care about the work and care about the brand. So
I feel like what's going to happen, kind of tying into what you're saying, what all of you are saying, is I think there's a saturation point that at some point the audience is actually going to get fatigued by the bombardment. And it's very easy on a very high frequency to keep people snagged for like a few seconds. You give them enough bright colors and enough changing imagery and enough novelty, and the brain's going to react with, fascination. We've got to a point where film trailers have an opening trailer of 5 seconds to tee up the trailer. I mean, it's a 30-second trailer, but it has a 5-second intro where it shows you like everything, just so you don't click away while the logos come up. And it's getting to a point now where I think that the attention span we're stress testing it to a point where eventually people, I think we're kind of going to screw people up to a point where they're eventually going to go, I don't think I can take this anymore. Like, everything's moving too quickly. And at that point, it's the content creators that make very engaging, high-frequency action, but it's connected to something bigger and longer term that you really invest in. They're the ones that are going to come up through the rubble of all of this debris, and I think that they will lead the charge. I think because it's just too easy to take advantage of people's novelty reward system. It's just too easy, which is why everyone ends up doing it. It's just path of least resistance.
When you're seeing a lot of young people tune it out. And that's interesting.
I think
to me.
they're developing an immune system.
They're developing. My niece is 8 years old. She already knows what to watch and what not to watch, and she's automatically she's like, I don't need that. I need that. Like, they're growing up in that world of saturation.
Which is really encouraging that they're actually just like, no, but what? No.
Teenagers discovering records again. It's just like it's
slowing
fascinating to me.
down. Finding some meaning in your interaction with something rather than just disposable content where you're just like, I don't care.
Yeah, and this move towards tactile or anything that's analog, we're consciously putting those into our installations now. Like simple buttons you touch. It's so rewarding to touch a button, or we're putting wheels into our installations where you turn and it could change content. It's just that you're not tapping glass, for that sort of thing. So we're getting delighted by it as well.
Well, it's actually going to become a novelty for the next generation, because the next generation of the young generation hasn't seen a lot of analog equipment. So for them, it's like, what the hell is this?
Are you serious? It's already happening.
Yeah. It's just like, what the hell? Like, I could hold this. It doesn't happen through the glass. So yeah, there'll probably be a resurgence, I guess, of analog.
I also find myself the favorite content that I'm consuming right now are audiobooks. I just like listening things and imagining what they're telling about. And I think this is a really good content because it's all about people connecting to each other, talking to each other. And I think it's the most meaningful thing that another human being can listen to. Or, I don't know, like as a visual person, I'm less and less becoming interested in consuming visual content, and I'm enjoying listening podcasts more and listening to people connecting to each other more. It feels more meaningful to me.
Go into that community aspect. Can anyone tell me why theatres who are losing so much traffic right now aren't doing like Game of Thrones nights, so that all the people that want to watch Game of Thrones together go to the cinema? Why isn't every screen at the cinema? Because it's the most community-based thing that we've got, and everyone shares their experience of it via Twitter or something as the episode happens. Why aren't theatres saying, everyone come to the goddamn cinema and we'll put 4 screens up for a live showing and you can watch it all together? Like, you heard it here first. Like, I own a patent. Thank you.
Wouldn't like the HBOs and the Netflix, they wouldn't want them to, they're ready to get rid of theaters, right? I mean, they want the release to be on HBO.
But I feel like this is going to be one of those things where people are going to go, wait, like we watch these things because they give us a bridge to each other. You watch Game of Thrones partly for the joy of then going, dudette, did you see this? Like, and if you take away the theatres, I think, don't take them away, just find a new use for them, given that the content is community-based anyway. It's almost like making use of, you've got an ace in the hole there, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like community is what people are striving for through their phones at the moment. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, give people analog sensory experiences, but give them the content that they're watching as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and steer away from isolation because there's just enough of that happening.
Yeah.
It's a good way to wrap up.
Isolation. We're out.
Cue the Joy Division song.